Olivia Rodrigo recently released the deluxe version of Guts, her sophomore album, featuring 5 new tracks, 4 of which were included on various vinyl variants, and one completely new one, All American. The album and its corresponding new tracks were successful. Back in the day, specifically the physical era, it was standard for artists to drop a deluxe version of their album. This forced fans who wanted to hear a few extra songs or so purchase the deluxe version, doubling sales. However, in the streaming age, this is less important. While deluxe albums can obviously boost streams, look at Ariana Grande dropping what she called a slightly deluxe version of Eternal Sunshine, the day after the album originally dropped. Their impact is far less. A great example of this is looking at Taylor Swift dropping Lover. Taylor Swift is obviously an industry juggernaut, selling albums at a scale that blows any competitor out of the water. Historically, before Lover, Taylor Swift was big enough where she was able to not put her music on streaming, and still secure first week sales of over 1 million. She's also no stranger to releasing deluxe versions of her albums, securing additional sales. However, by the time Lover was set to drop in 2019, the music industry had drastically changed. Even Taylor Swift couldn't afford not to release her album on Spotify. And so she released Lover with 18 tracks, her longest album to date, in order to secure additional streams. She also included handwritten notes and audio messages, all in order to give her digital release the personal touch she was famous for with her physical releases. If she had released Lover in 2010, she maybe would have released only 15 of the 18 tracks on a standard edition, and then released the rest on a deluxe, similar to her strategy for her 2012 release, Red. It wasn't just the streaming era either that killed deluxe albums. Katy Perry ran into some controversy during the Teenage Dream era. Teenage Dream is considered by many her magnum opus, and at least commercially, it blows 99% of pop albums out of the water. As of 2024, the album is 9 times platinum, and it sent 5 singles to #1. Through some dubious chart practices, but which early 2010s pop star wasn't guilty? Nearly 2 years after releasing Teenage Dream, Katy Perry released Teenage Dream: The Complete Confection, which included 3 new songs, 3 remixes, and the fan favorite acoustic version of The One That Got Away. One of those hit songs was Part of Me, which debuted at #1 on the Hot 100. Unfortunately for Katy though, she wasn't able to beat MJ's record. For those of you that don't know, Michael Jackson was initially the only artist to have 5 #1 singles from one single album, with the Bad album. Just the standard edition, no deluxe needed. Katy Perry matched this record with the standard version of Teenage Dream. And a month before Katy Perry released The Complete Confection, Billboard changed their rules, stating that any songs from a deluxe album that hit #1 wouldn't be counted towards the album's total. Instead, that #1 would count for the deluxe album, which would stand alone, meaning that if Katy Perry released The Complete Confection in January 2012 instead of March, she would have technically broken MJ's record and gotten 6 #1 singles from a singular album, even though it was a reissue.
Does that sound like something you want?
Yes.
Well, let me tell you, you'll never get it. Not from her.
Undoubtedly, this blow to the concept of how a deluxe album fits within the realm of its original enterprise prohibited some artists from being as eager to release a deluxe version. However, just because we're in the streaming era doesn't mean that labels aren't still strategizing on how to increase sales and chart positions. You've probably noticed that when an artist releases a single, it's usually just not the single. There's also a sped up version, a slowed down version, an instrumental, an acapella, an extended mix, a radio edit, etc. And while this trend isn't exactly new, there's always been instrumentals, acapellas, and extended mixes. To coincide with a single release, it's become extremely omnipresent. And part of this is due to TikTok. Sped up and slowed down songs frequently go viral on the app, as well as SoundCloud. So it makes sense that labels would want those songs to be official releases rather than edits. But obviously a huge part of this is also labels trying to get as many streams as possible, though the number of people streaming the instrumental version of a song seems limited at best. A trend that's also come into prominence though during the streaming age that in many ways mirror the release of deluxe albums is album reissues. We can use Dua Lipa as an example, and look at how both her self-titled debut album, as well as Future Nostalgia, she released 3 separate editions of each album. For Future Nostalgia, this constituted the standard album, an album of remixes, and then essentially a deluxe album, though its official name is the Moonlight Edition, with some additional tracks that are mostly collaborations. Her self-titled album and Future Nostalgia are the #1 and #2 respectively most streamed albums by a female singer on Spotify in its history, and their multiple releases are surely a huge component of that. So you could easily argue that reissued albums are the new deluxe album of the streaming age. Part of the reason the deficit in deluxe albums, at least in the traditional sense, is the shortening of attention spans when it comes to albums and music eras. Back in the 80s and 90s, an album cycle and era could last 2 or 3 years, but nowadays it seems that almost as soon as an album drops, people are clamoring for the next one. This forces artists to drop their deluxe album days after the drop of the standard edition. But of course, the biggest motivation is streams. Songs are shorter to increase streams, and hooks are placed at the front of the songs to grab attention. Funnily enough though, as streaming becomes more and more ubiquitous, vinyl sales are steadily, if not exponentially, rising, which means that A-list pop stars including Taylor Swift, Ariana Grande, Olivia Rodrigo, and Lana Del Rey have all released multiple vinyl variants in recent years, which has become a controversial practice to say the least. Some of these vinyls have bonus, vinyl edition exclusive tracks on these releases, and some of them just have different cover art. Regardless what these albums offer or don't offer though, you can think of these different vinyl variants as ploys by the label and artist to encourage rabid fans to collect all the possible variants and bonus tracks on each album to inevitably increase sales. It's a very egregious and divisive practice to say the least. At the end of the day though, labels and artists are going to do anything they can to increase sales.